Well, I won't take up much of the time, but I just want to welcome Avram back. Was it 7 years ago that you did Silver Maple Conspiracy?
It was 2013, yeah.
8 years.
Mm-hmm. 8 years,
And,
yes.
and
Yeah.
now back with some humor. So.
Right.
Why don't you tell us more about Asteroid Hits White House?
Well, it's not all humor, but there's a lot of humor in it. Let's put it that way. So, thank you all for being here. Most of you know who I am. Most of you, if not all of you, know who I am. Avram Friedman, father, grandfather. My grandson is driving around in a car right now, getting a nap apparently. Former plumber, solar energy technician, environmental social justice activist, and now fiction writer and kudzu farmer. I think we'll add all of those things together. So I want to talk about my latest book, Asteroid Hits White House. There is no "the" in the title. I want to point that out. It's Asteroid Hits White House as if it's a headline in a newspaper, basically. So, and that's actually an important aspect of it. So this is actually my second published book, as Chris mentioned. In 2013, I released The Sylva Maple Conspiracy. If it seems like I'm reading this statement, I am. I wrote it all down so to make sure that I included everything and didn't forget anything that I wanted to tell you. The thing is that I've already finished publishing I started writing my second book, The Truth About Plumbing, and I would have already finished writing, editing, and publishing The Truth About Plumbing if it hadn't been for a news report in June of 2020 about an asteroid that could possibly strike the Earth on November 2nd of 2020. That was real. That happened. That news report was the genesis of the idea behind Asteroid Hits White House, because November 2nd was the day before the national election in the United States of America, right? There was a worldwide pandemic going on with hundreds of thousands of people dying. There was a record hurricane season last year we're talking about. There was tremendous social unrest due to police brutality and the ascendance of the Black Lives Matter movement. There were right-wing mobs cheering racism and white supremacy at Trump rallies. The Chinese government was issuing dire warnings about Taiwan and amassing forces in the South China Sea. And now the Earth might get hit by an asteroid traveling at 21,000 miles an hour. So this kind of triggered my imagination with this turn of events. With all of these tumultuous things going on at once, my mind at one point put two of them together into a newspaper headline that read, "Asteroid Hits White House." So from this imaginary headline, new ideas kept springing into my head, and I started writing them down, and I couldn't write anything else until I finished writing this book. So that's why I haven't yet published The Truth About Plumbing.
Thanks for explaining that.
Right. So I started writing an essay that turned into a book based on the question of what could actually happen if there was a major asteroid strike. What would happen to our political system, to our food distribution system, to our monetary system, to our energy system, and every other system? In this book, the existing systems are destroyed, all of them. And they need to be put back together. Or rather, some systems have to be developed to replace the needs provided for by the old systems that were destroyed. I soon came to realize that as the writer, I could use this as an opportunity through the book's characters to convey my ideas about how things could be put back together in a more beneficial way than what we're doing now. So that's an important part of the book to me, although it may be completely boring to everyone else. That exercise is actually focused in the second part of the book. Now, there's also a third part of the book that I'm not going to talk about because that would give away too much of the plot. But the first part of the book goes through a series of scenarios in which important characters are encountering the consequences of the meteor strike. We see President Ronald Trump in the Midwestern battleground states on the last day of his campaign. We see his opponent, former Vice President Joseph Bison, who is in Pennsylvania and winding up the day in Philadelphia. Surviving members of the military leadership have to respond to the national catastrophe somehow. There are two important characters who are in Asheville when the asteroid strikes. And how are the astronauts on the International Space Station impacted by what's happening on the Earth? That's in there too. So that's mostly what the first part of the book is about. But something of great significance happens toward the end of the second part of the book. And this is leading up to the passage in the book that I'm going to read to you today. Elon Musk, the chief executive officer of both the Tesla Motor Company and SpaceX, makes an announcement that disrupts the National Council on Reformation. She informs the council that a team of statisticians employed by SpaceX has done a comprehensive mathematical study of the asteroid and its trajectory. They came to the conclusion that it was a mathematical impossibility that the asteroid striking the White House on November 2nd was a random act of nature. And this announcement completely disrupts the council. So what I'm going to read is a segment that includes an interview on NPR's Some Things Considered with one of the scientists who is present at the National Council on Reformation, the meeting when Elon Musk made this announcement. And after reading, we can engage in questions and discussions if you like. So, hopefully I have this. Okay. Elon Musk's assertion at the 2021 National Council on Reformation disrupted the conference to such an extent that the remainder of the program was postponed as those present erupted into discussion, debate, and argument bordering on violence. The news media covering the National Council on Reformation delivered full front-page headlines and loudly broadcast bulletins as quickly as the current state of working technology allowed. Within 24 hours, the entire world was alerted to the affirmation of this astonishing reality. "Meteors strike no accident," read the entire upper half of the front page of the New York Times. National Public Radio broadcast the story that night. This is Some Things Considered, and I'm Laura Meyerson. According to scientists attending the National Council on Reformation, there is no possibility the asteroid that obliterated the nation's capital city on November 2nd was a random act of nature. But if it was not a random act of nature, what was it? Here to talk with us in our Philadelphia studio this evening is NASA scientist Dr. Victoria Johnson. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Johnson. It's a pleasure to be here, Laura. Thank you for inviting me. Dr. Johnson, can you give us an idea of what the discussion is like at the National Council on Reformation right now in light of the recent revelation? What are the implications? Well, there's a lot of contention at the council right now about what the implications are. We don't know yet is the honest and most accurate answer. We know that the meteor strike was not a random act of nature. That leaves open a whole realm of possibilities for what caused that object to strike the White House on that day. I can tell you there are ongoing discussions about theories ranging from theological explanations to either an earthbound enemy or a space alien attack. Does that pit religious leaders against scientists at the conference? Asked Meyerson. Well, that's one source of contention, replied Johnson. It's a situation in which no explanation at this point seems plausible to the scientific community. Theological explanations are no more or less implausible than anything else. Can you give examples of some of the scenarios discussed? Well, there's a group of military leaders, arms dealers, and a few elected representatives concerned that the Russians or the Chinese might be responsible for the attack. Proponents of this theory are mostly members of the older generation who remember the Cold War. The fear is that one of these nations has developed a secret weapon that can control the movement of asteroids, and that this nation will now use the new weapon to dominate the world. That's very frightening, noted Meyerson. Well, yes, I suppose it would be, but there are multiple problems with this theory, continued Dr. Johnson. Technologically, no country in the world is close to having the capability of moving a mass in space that size at that speed while directing its course so precisely from that distance. We've been tracking this asteroid since 2018. It didn't just materialize minutes or hours before the strike. The Russians, the Chinese, or the United States for that matter, may have the capability of bombing an asteroid in an attempt to divert its current course, but to then direct it to hit the Earth in a specific place on a specific day, no, nobody on Earth knows how or has the capacity to do that, regardless of how much further ahead of us we fear they may have progressed technologically. Also, since the meteor strike, there has been no indication that either Russia or China is trying to dominate the world. Both countries have been working in full cooperation with the rest of the world, trying their best to recover themselves. It makes no sense to blame either of these nations. There is no evidence of any kind supporting this explanation. But the Cold Warriors are not thoroughly convinced. Well, that's somewhat reassuring, said Meyerson. What are some of the alternate explanations being discussed? Well, there is a coalition of religious leaders, business people, and another small group of elected representatives who are suggesting the meteor strike is proof that an intelligent supreme being and creator of the universe exists, and that this was a sign, a message, a warning to all of humanity. That's rather interesting. How does the scientific community address this assertion? Well, as a scientist not well versed in theology, I don't really know how to evaluate this explanation on the basis of biblical reference or traditional religious theoretical commentary. But using the principles of logic, this assertion can only be proven or disproven by discovering proof of a different explanation, and so far there is none. Given the circumstances, the theological explanation is something perhaps we all need to think about, including the scientific community. That's a profound statement coming from a scientist, Meyerson commented. Well, these are profound circumstances, and we've all been shaken to the point we are questioning the basis of our personal perceptions of reality. I think that can be said pretty much of everyone participating in the council. I'm beginning to understand that, said Meyerson. What other explanations have been discussed? Well, there is a third camp, mostly consisting of people under 40 years old, a few scientists, and 2 or 3 young members of the General Assembly. This group believes the meteor strike was an alien attack. They offer no evidence, while admitting the only reason they have come to this conclusion is they find the alternatives even more unlikely. It sounds like perhaps this group has been reading too much science fiction, quipped Meyerson. Well, it may surprise you that there are some serious scientists who favor this explanation over the others. We can't necessarily dismiss it out of hand. But while an alien attack is an intriguing, if unlikely, possibility, it begs the question, why would aliens stop attacking if their purpose was to defeat and destroy us? Why send just one meteor to cause widespread death and destruction, but then allow us to recover? The aliens, if they exist, apparently aren't friendly given the death and damage they've caused, but they haven't tried to completely destroy us either, nor have they invaded Earth to enslave or eat us, chuckle. Okay. In fact, there has been no other sign or evidence of their existence. The alien attack theory doesn't seem to make much sense either, I'm afraid. Where do cabinet members stand on this? Asked Myosin. Do they seem to favor one explanation over the other? Well, the president, his cabinet members, and about 60% of those present at the council have expressed no opinion publicly. But I can assure you they are paying close attention to the intense debates that are taking place. Well, Dr. Johnson, I'm afraid we've run out of time. This is a fascinating development at the National Council on Reformation. Thank you for sharing this important information with us. Will you come back to give us an update sometime in the near future? Yes, I'd be glad to. Thank you for having me, Laura. We've been talking with NASA scientist Dr. Victoria Johnson. This is Some Things Considered. I'm Laura Myosin for NPR, listener and corporate-sponsored public radio. Okay. So the reason I read that passage is because it really is a key passage. It's the first realization. This takes place in 2025, 5 years after, 5 years after the meteor strike. And everybody had until that point thought that this was just a coincidence, that the meteor struck and caused this widespread destruction. But now this great revelation comes that it could not possibly have been. The odds are so great that it's an impossibility that it would happen, that it would strike the White House on that date with the consequences that it had. And so the third part of the book is the search for who caused this. And that's all I'm going to say about it. And again, back in the second part of the book, I hope others will actually find it interesting. It gave me an opportunity to talk about, well, if all of our public systems were destroyed, the political system, the economic system, the energy system, the agricultural system, how would we build back to survive, as a human race? And what I really want to do there is spur some discussion or at least thought in the minds of the readers about how would you reconstruct the society, the world, if we had to do that, if we were given the opportunity to start from scratch again, what would be a realistic way of reconstructing all of these systems in a more equitable way and a more ecologically minded, environmentally minded way. So I invite discussion and questions about that.
So do we get electricity back? Where's that gone?
Well, the electricity is gone at first, but yes, electricity is replaced. In my mind, of course, it's replaced with solar energy and renewable energy technologies.
Very optimistic.
Well, I think it's more likely to happen if there are no other alternatives available. And again, if we're starting from scratch, then it really becomes a question of what do we want to invest toward? Is there any reason to go back to fossil fuels at this point? Because for the same investment, we can get clean, safe energy for probably a less expense.
Well, that's true now, yeah.
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 So, but to say that it's optimistic, I don't think it's optimistic. I think it's possibilistic. Yeah. Hey, Bonnie. How are you? It's all right.
Does anybody ever question the statisticians, right? Musk's. So, Musk's statisticians come out and it's not like right now we have evidence that evidence sways people's minds, right?
Nobody questions it because it's such hard evidence, and I'll read you the passage about it, which is pretty convincing, I think. If I can find it. Let's see, I think it's just before here. Right. Okay. So here's the part of the report that Musk reads to the council. He says, what I'm going to relate to you now is the part that is relevant to this discussion. So every 5,300 years, on average, a meteor of the approximate size or larger than the one that hit Washington, D.C. on November 2nd, 2020, strikes the Earth every 5,300 years. This means that there is one chance in 1,934,500 of such a strike anywhere on Earth randomly happening on any one particular day. Okay. Now, there are 197 million square miles on the surface of the planet. That includes ocean, land, everything. Okay. This means there is 1 in 197 million chance that an asteroid will randomly hit within any one particular square mile on the surface of the Earth. These are real statistics, incidentally. Okay. Furthermore, okay, and this is one thing I didn't tell you about. The asteroid struck at a perfect 90-degree angle. Okay, which is the chances of that happening are 1 in 64,800. That there are 64,800 possible angles at which a meteor can strike if the entire hemisphere of angular possibilities is divided into 1 degree increments. Okay, so the chances of a 90-degree strike are 1 in 64,800. Okay, this means there's 1 in 64,000. Okay. Finally, the chances of such an object randomly meeting all 3 of the above criteria by striking the White House at a 90-degree angle on November 2nd, 2020, is 1 in a number with so many zeros that for all practical purposes it's infinity. In other words, the chances of that happening are essentially 0. To me, that's pretty convincing. Yeah. So nobody argued with them. At least none of the scientists. They all realized the validity of the statistical analysis.
Yes.
We were thinking of the general populace.
Right.
You pay so much attention to statistics.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
I came in late. Can you give me a refresher of what?
Oh gosh. Let's see. Well, we just learned from Elon Musk, who's the character who in this book that owns Tesla Motors and SpaceX. Okay, that she had a team in SpaceX, a team of statisticians that did a statistical analysis of the trajectory and the impact of the asteroid, and came to the conclusion that it was a statistical impossibility that it was a random act of nature.
Now, this asteroid did actually hit on November, what was the date, 2nd?
November 2nd,
2020.
20
Where did it hit exactly?
well, it didn't.
Oh.
In reality, it did not hit. Okay. That was where I altered reality and created the basis for this book.
So, what is the
But there was a possibility it would hit on that day.
Okay.
They had announced it like 6 months earlier that there was a possibility that it would hit.
So in the book.
In the book, it hits.
It hits 90 degrees?
It hit 90 degree on the west wing of the White House.
And did anybody die?
6 million people died.
What?
How can you be so brutal?
I know. I was very brutal. The entire all of Washington D.C. was obliterated, and all the surrounding area, Arlington,
Oh my God.
everything was leveled, flattened, destroyed.
So that's not
The
last page of
Pentagon
the
was
book, right?
gone. The Capitol was gone. That's all in the book.
But that's not the last page of the book, right?
No, that's the beginning of the book.
So I'm curious, can you like give us a little tip or a little, how shall I say, get us excited so we want to
The
read?
book is for sale. You have to read it.
Yeah, I want to know what's going to happen.
Well, that's why I want you to read the book. Yeah. Right. Well, what happens, again, is the political system, the economic system, every system, the agriculture, it's all destroyed.
Wow.
We have to rebuild from scratch.
Which, at this point, I wonder if that's such a bad idea.
Worldwide. Well, except for all the death and destruction that took place.
Worldwide, even though it happened in the United States.
Right, because when the meteor struck the atmosphere, it created such a large electromagnetic pulse that it wiped out all electronics,
Oh my goodness.
all electronic circuitry all over the world.
Which would actually happen, right?
Yes, yes, we have learned from nuclear explosions that within a several thousand-mile radius it can knock out the electronic circuitry, and this would be hundreds of times more powerful than that, or thousands of times, and so yes, it knocked out all electronic circuitry all over the world and destroyed that industry. It had to be rebuilt from scratch.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So now, knowing what the premise is of this book, and I'm very interested in reading it, of course, but knowing the premise, what inspired you to write this scenario? What gave you this inspiration?
You have to be on time, Bonnie.
I missed that part.
What inspired me was the news report that this asteroid might hit on November 2nd, the day before the election. And things just started mixing up in my head, and I put this together.
Would you call it more, what do they call that, a special kind of science, fantastical science fiction, or is it more political?
It's alternate reality, science fiction, political science fiction, all of the things you just said.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Is it reading for a teenager or more for an adult?
Well, a teenager could read it, I think. You don't-
Open-minded teenager.
An open-minded teenager who has open-minded parents who don't mind a little bit of foul language. But,
We hear that now on the news.
Yeah.
right. Yes, sir.
I can't help but notice that it seems to be, this novel seems to be a canvas for you to paint an alternative future that includes pieces that I think you long for.
Right.
And I'm curious, can you imagine anything less severe than an asteroid strike, changing the conditions on the planet enough for things to develop in the ways that you're...
Yeah, but it would be more gradual. Well, yeah, I do. Like I say, I'm a possibilist rather than an optimist, and I think that we have the ability to create a better world. And I think time's getting short, though.
That's what they're saying now about climate change.
Yeah.
So, in other words, the whole idea of this is that, in a sense, you heard that saying before, that man never does anything until it gets to like a catastrophic
Right.
situation. Is that kind of like why you sort of put us in that particular setting so that you can see how human beings would react and be able to hustle and get things done?
I wouldn't say things happened in that order. I'd say that the first thing that came to my mind, again, I heard this news report about the possibility of this asteroid striking. And from that sprang the ideas. And I didn't intend to write a political manifesto when I started it. But as I was writing it, I came to realize that I could do essentially that, And so I think that's kind of the way it manifested itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So are the books for sale today?
Yes, in the back there.
How much?
It's $14.99.
That's not bad.
Cheap at any price.
And then does the author sign it?
The author will sign it, gladly. Yeah.
Is it a page turner?
I would say so.
Was for me.
I read it.
Well, so you have testimony right here.
Yeah.
I like a page turner.
Well, I have to brag a little bit. Thomas Raincrow read it and decided to write a review for it because he liked it. It's in the Rapid River magazine in Asheville, which is the oldest cultural magazine in Western North Carolina or something. And so,
Could be made into a movie. Maybe.
perhaps. Maybe that'll be my next project. I don't know if I can do the special effects needed, but yeah.
Someone else.
They can do amazing things.
That would be fun. Yeah.
The asteroid could hit off camera.
Asteroid hit off camera.
I mean, you're saving you having to
On and offset.
Wait. Let me hear. I can't hear.
I'm just saying you wouldn't have to show the asteroid hitting. You could just
Show the aftermath.
Yeah.
You can do it with claymation.
Do some animation, I suppose.
Stop motion photography.
Yummy.
Right. I had fun showing how Trump would react.
Oh, I like that.
You mean,
If-
what was his name though?
His name was Ronald Trump.
that's right,
Ronald
Oh,
Trump.
instead of Donald.
Ronald Trump, and his opponent in the election was Joseph Bison.
That's cute.
And Ernie Sanders plays an important part in this
That's so cute.
as well.
Is Ernie part of the Committee of Reformation?
Is Ernie part of it?
Ernie is a very important part of it. Yes. I'm not going to. I don't want to say too much about it because it'll give too much away. Yeah.
In 2020, Trump was president, so that's pertinent then for
Right.
that date.
Right.
Wow. Now, you're saying 6 million people died.
Well, 6 million people died from the impact. Many more died
From the aftermath?
from the aftermath around the world, and the food shortage. I mean, just all the catastrophes that took place as a result of that. Yeah.
I wonder what happens to the ocean and the marine life and all that's probably upset too.
They were probably better off than anybody, I think. If you were underwater, you were probably pretty safe, which is a theme of maybe another book I'm thinking about writing. Because I don't know if you're probably all familiar with this, but whales and dolphins apparently once inhabited the land. They have vestigial legs, leg bones and such. And it's kind of a mystery about why intelligent beings moved into the ocean.
Wow.
And so I have another idea about writing a book about that. So it's another type of science fiction book, which is a little bit related to this book.
You could combine it with plumbing and how whales invented plumbing.
It's all in there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's funny.
Actually, in The Truth About Plumbing, at the end of the book, I make reference to the whales as well.
Oh, okay.
Yes. If you go into the ocean, you don't need any plumbing.
What's the truth about
If you live, well, yeah.
Yes, when that.
Oh, when is that coming out? Well, I finished writing it. I'm actually just doing like the editing now, and it'll probably be 6 months before it's published. By the time I get finished with the getting the copyright and everything.
Is this your first one that you're talking about, your first book?
No, The Truth About Plumbing is my second book that got delayed by the writing of this book. Yeah.
No, this is your,
No, that's my first book. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm afraid we have a dog that we need to go release, but thank you all for my.
Well, thank you for being here, Catherine.